feedback or causing interruption during the meeting. After each agenda item, I will be announcing public comment. For those of you who are on Zoom, if you go down to the participants button, there's on your bottom of your screen, on the right side will appear a raised hand, button. Should be grayed out, push on that, and that'll let the host know that you want to speak. If you are calling on a landline or a cell phone, you will hit *9, and that'll alert us that you want to speak as well. And if you change your mind, hit *9 again, that'll take you off the wishing to speak list. So with that, we'll move to item 2, which is a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. District 1,
District 1 here.
District 5, Corona,
Present.
thank you. Eastvale,
Here.
Harupa Valley,
Here.
Menifee,
I'm here.
Moreno Valley, Marietta, Norco,
Here.
Paris,
Here.
San Jacinto, and Wildemar.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Item, do we have any requests to speak on any item not on the agenda?
I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised.
Very good. Okay, item 4 is additions and revisions. Do we have any?
No, sir.
Yeah, we're moving right along. Item 5, approval of minutes for the meeting on August 24th.
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
District 1,
Yes.
District 5, Corona,
Aye.
Eastvale,
Aye.
Harupa Valley,
Yes.
Menifee,
Aye.
Moreno Valley, Marietta, Norco,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
San Jacinto, and Wildemar.
Yes.
The item passes.
Thank you. Item 6, the Inland Empire Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Adoption. And this will be presented by Jillian.
Good afternoon, Chair Vargas and committee members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. I think it's been a number of years since I've presented to the Western Riverside County Programs and Projects Committee. I usually have the pleasure of presenting to the Budget and Implementation Committee, so it's great to be here with you today. I hope you're all doing well. Today, it is my pleasure to present to you the near final draft of the Inland Empire Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan, or IECMCP. I know what you're thinking. RCTC needed another plan. In concept, no, I don't think we did, considering you just recently adopted the Traffic Relief Plan, the Long Range Transportation Study, Next Generation Rail Study, Next Generation Express Line Study, 10-year Highway Delivery Plan. I could go on, but we had to develop the IECMCP for one very important reason: to be eligible to pursue and hopefully receive SB1 Solutions for Congested Corridors Program competitive grant funding. Let me explain. When SB1 was passed in 2017, it created a number of new funding programs, one of which is the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, or SCCP for short. The only eligible applicants for SCCP funding are regional transportation planning agencies like the Commission. SB1 funds SCCP at $250 million annually. SCCP is intended to fund projects that facilitate multimodal congestion relief on congested corridors. As such, the guidelines require that projects submitted for consideration in the program be part of a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. The state adopted guidelines for CMCPs in 2018, and staff got to work right away collaborating with Caltrans District 8, our MPO, SCAG, WRCOG, and the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, developing the IECMCP with the help of technical experts at Cambridge Systematics. We've wrapped up the IECMCP just in time for its adoption as the CTC considers the Commission's latest SCCP application for the 7191 interchange. I apologize for how Chapter 3 turned out in the attachment to this item in your agenda package. Something strange happened when converting the file to a PDF, and this will certainly be corrected when the item goes to the Commission on October 14th. I'd like to note that the IECMCP only covers the western portion of Riverside County out to the pass area and the valley area of San Bernardino County. In the future, Commission staff would be happy to work with CVAG on developing a multimodal corridor plan for the Coachella Valley that is in alignment with the project priorities of that area. So now that you know why we created another plan, I'd like to turn it over to Gary Hamrick from Cambridge Systematics to tell you about this plan we've put together. Gary?
Thank you, Jillian. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to walk through, Jillian gave a great background on why this plan has been done. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what is in the plan, what was done to put it together, and what the end results are. If you can go to the next slide. So there are two statewide guiding documents for how to do the so-called CMCP, or Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. And by the way, these are being done now all across the state because, as Jillian mentioned, any agency that wants to get funding through SB1 from the gas tax revenue must have one of these plans ready to go. And the way they've done it is so-called cycles. So cycle 1 was a while ago, cycle 2 is currently in process, cycle 3 will be the next. And those are where you're actually asking for money for your projects. So the California Transportation Commission put together their set of guidelines on how to do a CMCP. Caltrans then published earlier this year an even more comprehensive set of guidelines. And in fact, those are being refined as we go now and learn things. Next slide. This statement is kind of important. This is in the CTC guidelines. There's no specific format that a CMC must meet. Plans are unique to the region, which they are prepared. So the idea here is that this is not a top-down process where Caltrans headquarters or the governor's office says, Riverside and San Bernardino, here's what your plan is and here are your priorities. It's quite the opposite. It's building from the priorities, goals, policies, objectives, and already identified projects of the local agencies. So as I go through this, you'll see a lot of emphasis on what you have already done and how we use that. Next slide. It's an 8-step process. And essentially, we're doing everything except the very last one, the green box, monitor and evaluate. That will be next. And I'll walk through some of these as I go through these slides. Next slide. So when we originally envisioned this project, it was essentially, as Jillian said, all of the Inland Empire, excluding the Coachella Valley for the most part, and some other areas to the north. Next slide. This is the original north-south extent. This is the original east-west extent. As we got into looking at this in a technical level, we realized that these areas are so vast, the corridors are so long, and the issues are so specific to the local area that we really couldn't do a deep enough dive. So next slide, we went to 10 subcorridors. Another slide, please. We have 5 north-south subcorridors and 5 east-west subcorridors. So this is the same area, but we're breaking it down now into localized corridors where we can really talk about the issues of all of your cities, of the specific communities, of the specific freeways and arterials. And we've named these corridors not by a freeway name. For example, the I-215 corridor, we've named it how people travel. So from one area in the Inland Empire to another area that people like to go from work to home, or they go to school in another area. We've identified sort of the trip patterns and how people want to get around. Next slide. The next slide is the east-west subcorridors. Next slide. Now, this is not being done in a vacuum where staff and consultants go in a back room and do some work. It's very important to have a robust stakeholder engagement process that's written into the CTC guidelines. So we did that. We had a project committee consisting of all the agencies here, including RCTC, of course. And then in Riverside, we had a unique situation where RCTC had recently done the Reboot My Commute effort. And there's a tremendous amount of public feedback on what the public thinks about transportation issues, problems out there today, what kind of solutions they'd like to see. So rather than going out and giving them another survey and confusing them, we really utilized that information, which was fresh, good information about what the public thinks about transportation in Riverside. Next slide. For the technical analysis, this covers just some of the many different characteristics and data points that we looked at. So demographic and land use. What are the areas actually, what are the characteristics of these corridors? How do people move around? What are the trip characteristics? What kinds of trips, trip lengths? Safety, where are the collisions occurring and where are concentrations of collisions? Active transportation, how can we improve biking and walking? And then of course, looking at freeway, arterial, transit, and freight. So again, the word multimodal is very important. This is not your old freeway plan where we simply look at what is the level of service on the freeway and do we add lanes. It's really about all modes. Next slide. Some of the data, just as an example, population density. So where you have more density, you have different issues associated with transportation and how people get around and how they want to get around and make their trips. And we analyze this for the entire region as well as the subcorridors. Without going into detail, you can see the red areas are the area of higher population density in this case, which is a north-south corridor. And we're finding along I-210, I-10, SR91 concentrations of higher density, for example. Next slide. Another way to look at it is population to employment ratio. So if you have a lot of people and fewer jobs, people are going to have to commute longer distances to get to their place of employment. And that directly relates to the kinds of improvements for transportation that we look at for each individual area. Next slide. Journey to work mode share is interesting. So in this Inland Empire area, now this is pre-COVID, you actually have a higher share of carpooling in California as a whole. So people tend to get in carpools out here to get around. And work at home is the second highest mode of travel, if you will. Again, this is before COVID. Now I'm sure it's by far the highest. And we'll see how that resumes back to normal as people get back to work in their original place of employment. Next slide. I mentioned we looked at safety and collision. So we looked at each freeway, how that freeway compares to the countywide average and the Caltrans District 8 average. Found that SR91 in both directions, I-215 southbound and I-10 eastbound are the freeways with the highest collision rates. And that again, it directly relates to the kinds of improvements we want to look at for those freeways, not only to solve congestion, but also to solve some of the safety issues where you see a lot of incidents occurring. Next slide. So then we did a deeper dive down to the individual subcorridors, and here's some examples. Next slide. This is one of the 10, and again, Beaumont to Temecula is this particular example. Every collision for the past 3 years was noted, its location and its type. Did it involve a bicyclist, a pedestrian, a truck, or other collisions? So then we can then focus on where these collisions are occurring and what kind of projects will help. Next slide. We've also looked at traffic conditions. So of course, while the freeway is not the main component of a multimodal corridor plan, it's still very important. We recognize that. People are still doing a lot of their trips in the freeway system. and that will return after COVID. So we're looking at where the bottlenecks are occurring and what kinds of projects will be helping that. Next slide. So this is the AM, this is the PM. We can flip to the next one. So once we kind of looked at all the corridors and what are the characteristics and how they're operating and what are their problems with respect to transportation, we then had an exercise of gathering all of the recommended improvements from these sources and probably 10 more. But of interest to you in the county, well, first of all, we looked obviously at the regional transportation plan, the guiding document for transportation. We looked at the federal program for looking at transportation projects that would be potentially eligible for federal monies. And then we looked at local programs, the RCTC long range study, which was recently completed, the Riverside COG active transportation plan, RCTC 10-year highway delivery plan, traffic relief plan. All of these you're familiar with, but I wanted to just make sure that you understood that we didn't start from scratch. We're not looking at new priorities or new projects. We really built upon all of the work that the county has already done. Next slide. Guiding principles are a very important part of this. We can't just go in and say we're going to have a bunch of projects to improve transportation. We have to say, what are the overall objectives for improving transportation and how people live? Next slide. So again, we went back to the local. We went back to your long-range transportation study, which has specific visions and goals and objectives. Those were directly brought into the project, as well as the San Bernardino County goals and objectives. And next slide, there are very similar types of things at the state level, and of course, even the federal level. In this case, the Caltrans Smart Mobility Framework. And when you really look at these, many are the same, but there's certainly a very specific focus to how Riverside is looking at your goals and priorities for transportation improvements. And we made sure to take those into account. Next slide. So in terms of project evaluation and the final project lists that are being published, we have over 420 roadway, freeway, and transit projects. And again, all of those would not be a surprise to you. All of your proposed express lanes projects, interchange improvements, auxiliary lanes, et cetera, transit projects, BRT, enhancements to Metrolink, enhancements to local transit. And then in the area of active transportation, bike and ped, literally hundreds of active transportation projects. So proposed new bikeways, both from local city plans all the way up to sub-regional plans. And as mentioned, we very importantly incorporated the 10-year highway delivery plan that you've done a lot of work on already. Next slide. So that's a summary of the overall plan. We kicked this off July of 2019, started our project committees involving all the agencies that I mentioned at the beginning. We had our first draft earlier this year, and we're hopefully going to have our final draft in another week or so. That then not only Riverside is approving, San Bernardino is approving, and Caltrans as well. Then once that document is finalized, you'll be eligible to go into cycle 3 when that comes around to request money for specific projects for SB1. And the final slide. I will stop there, and I'm very happy to answer any questions about the work that's been done.
Very good. Thank you both for those presentations. Okay, any members of the commission have any questions or comments?
I'm not showing any hands raised.
I'm trying to find the place to raise it. There we are. Got to be smarter than this screen.
Supervisor Jeffries has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Supervisor Jeffries.
So I was looking at the 215/60 interchange from Moreno Valley into Riverside, and it's shown as probably one of the, if not the worst congested interchanges in the county. As we're talking multimodal movement, I believe we had a settlement that we had to agree to with folks in that region, UCR region, to not do any multimodal through there. Because I had brought up that we needed to do more down the 215 corridor to move goods out of all those warehouses and reduce the tractor trailer rigs on the 215. I think, Ann, you had shared that we couldn't use the rail line any more than it's already being used, essentially, because of the lawsuit we'd settled. I'm wondering if you can elaborate, is that area truly ruled out from fixing the traffic, or do we have options?
Okay,
So, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I'll take that one. So the 6215 interchange is, as you say, is very, very congested. We do have remaining, our last remaining project on the 215 that's in the measure. We do have the addition of a lane, a HOV lane from, I think, Nuevo Road up into Box Springs. So we do still have a project that hasn't been built yet there to finally make that last connection. But with respect to the rail lines, it's not the legal settlement that prohibits the rail traffic, the freight rail traffic through there. It's that BNSF has very little commercial enterprise along that corridor. There are some companies that do receive freight service there, but BNSF has made it pretty clear they don't plan on expanding on the rest of, let's see, south of Paris and south and east of Paris, where the rail lines are called red boarded, which means they're no longer serviceable tracks. BNSF has made it clear that they don't plan on extending any further out into the San Jacinto Valley. So I think it's more of a restriction related to BNSF business interests as opposed to the legal settlement.
And I get that, but you would think that if they were paying attention, they would see the explosion of warehouses in that corridor that have already occurred and those that are still yet to come. And if our goal is to move people along and perhaps move freight along, continuing to drive all of that warehouse traffic onto the 215 is going to be pretty unsuccessful. It already is. So what's our alternative?
Right, and I should have, to your point, I should have added that when we built the Paris Valley Line project, we double tracked, I want to say about 10 miles of that area. So the passenger rail would be on its own set of tracks. So the freight rail could be on a separate set of tracks. Subsequent projects that we have out there would have us double tracking the whole way along the 215. So to your point about BNSF and their capability to serve customers, the track will be there for them to be able to do that along the 215.
Okay.
The area where it will be difficult for them to, well, I would say it would be very, very difficult to double track through the UCR neighborhood. So that's where the bottleneck will come in, is not being able to double track through the UCR neighborhood. But everything along 215 eventually will be double track. So freight could be on its own track, so there's no interference with passenger rail. I agree with you about the challenge. It will be the UCR neighborhood bottleneck.
Yeah, because and I'll shut up after this. The problem is all the traffic is now, I shouldn't say all the traffic, a large amount of traffic is now using Cajalco, Van Buren, even Alessandro, even though that's posted. The complaint levels are dramatically increasing because the truck traffic crossing through from the 91 to the 215 and back is getting pretty bad. And as you know, both Cajalco is just a little 2-lane road, which we're working on, and in 20 years we'll have it done. But you know, that doesn't fix all the problems, including Van Buren. So we got a problem there, and it's only getting worse.
Right. And if I'm losing track, I think it was last summer, when we brought forward the truck study, where it's very clear that some of the most immediate traffic impacts related to the warehouse projects are not necessarily the big long haul trucks. It's the trucks that are doing more local deliveries where we're seeing a lot of localized traffic impacts on local roads, as you mentioned. So we do have that truck study at the basis of a lot of the information we have. So we could start having that conversation again if the commission wanted to.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other commissioner?
I don't see any other hands raised.
You don't see?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll open
Chair?
up public comment. Yes,
Chair Vargas, could I make a couple comments about the
sure.
plan as well? Thank you. So commissioners, as was mentioned, we are, in order to be eligible for SB1 congested corridor funding, we had to prepare this plan. And I really appreciate the work that's been done, especially because we coordinated with our partners in San Bernardino County. So we had an efficiency of scale there in preparing a plan that would allow us to be eligible throughout, for all the Inland Empire projects. I do want to point out that it will be very interesting to see what kind of investments the CTC focuses on with its SB1 congested corridor program. This round, their projects recommendations are due out in November. They'll approve them in December. And there is significant concern that there will be efforts to focus more on rail projects and other types of projects, as opposed to focusing on some of the key, congestion related challenges we have here in the Inland Empire. So I always like to point out that in the legislation itself, the congested corridor category specifically cited the 91 corridor as a perfect example of a multimodal corridor in need of investment. And so last time we didn't get any money for the 7191 in the congested corridor program. I'm hoping that in November we'll get some better news. So I'm glad we've got this package done and the plan done. We're complying with the requirements. We're submitting good projects, but the proof will be in whether or not projects like the ones we see are important actually receive some funding. So stay tuned for that conversation in the next couple of months.
Great, thank you. Okay, public comment. Do we have any requests to speak?
No, sir.
All right, well, thank you, Jillian and Gary, for a great presentation. And I will now entertain a motion to approve.
Benoit, I'll go ahead and move the item.
Quit all second it.
Thank
Roll
you.
call vote, please.
District 1,
Yes.
District 5,
Aye.
Corona,
Aye.
Eastvale,
Aye.
Harupa Valley,
Yes.
Menifee,
Aye.
Moreno Valley, Marietta, Norco,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes,
San Jacinto, and Wildemar.
Yes.
The item passes.
all right, thank you, everyone. Item 7 is amendment to the agreement related to the construction of the Riverside Downtown Layover Facility Expansion Project. And this will be presented by Bryce Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Make sure my mic's working.
Yes,
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Bryce Johnston. I'm the construction manager for RCTC. I'm here today to request additional funds for the construction of the Riverside Layover Facility Project. This project was awarded to Reyes Construction Company last June and is currently under construction. The project is located at the north end of the downtown Riverside Metrolink station and adds storage tracks and utilities that allow for overnight servicing of the trains, including being able to empty the holding tanks each night. Next slide. Next. The project is located in an old rail yard, been there a long time, and adjacent to the existing BNSF mainline track. The site also has numerous existing utilities that are impacting the project. During design, much of it was anticipated, but it's difficult to foresee all these complications that are in ground. The largest impact of the construction budget was the extensive hazardous materials that's been encountered that's had to be removed and being removed and disposed at hazardous materials facility, which ended up being just greatly significant than what the designers anticipated and was in the hazardous materials report. This one change consumed a large part of the available contingency. Another large impact was as the excavation proceeded, existing utility facilities were discovered that required a few redesigns of sewer facilities being installed as part of this project. The impact of these unforeseen in-ground issues resulted in those redesigns, and that's costly since with the sewer lines, it just has to flow downhill, and that's not easy to design sometimes. Next slide. Shown here are the contract amounts and the amounts we are requesting. The original bid was 4.4 million, and the contingency was about 10% of that, which for this size of a project, being small in a complicated area, is just not sufficient. And it's just not possible to anticipate all the issues that we might encounter. So therefore, we're requesting an additional 455,000 in construction funds to ensure we can complete the project, which is expected to be completed in April of 2021. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm able to take questions you might have.
Thank you, Bryce. Any commissioners have any questions or comments?
Supervisor Hewitt has
I'll
his
ask
hand
a, I'll ask a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So was there a soils report done at the beginning of this when we were doing the initial study and estimate on the project?
Yes, when they do the soil reports, they take corings or borings, but you can only do so many, and then the designer has to try to extrapolate to estimate what they believe is there. And I wasn't around when they actually did that report, but they did do it. They knew it was there. They just didn't anticipate to the extent it ended up being once you got further deep in the ground.
And what was the contamination?
Diesel. There may be more than that, but that's the one that I remember being said.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have my hand up.
Supervisor Hewitt?
Yeah, some of my questions were the same as Mayor Zimmerman's, that basically, again, Bryce, I'm sure you got the numbers right on the top of your head. How many additional cubic yards was it? And was it like hauled up to close to Bakersfield where most of the stuff goes?
I actually don't have the cubic yards on top of my head. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to do that comparison, but I will respond to that. I do know the change order for that material approached $120-some thousand. But I need to come up, and it was delivered to the hazardous facility, and I do believe it was Bakersfield, but I'll double check that.
And of course, then it also we have to secure other good soil to bring in and replace it too. So
that's all part of the change order.
Okay, great. No, it's just, it's same as taking out an old service station, and it's a lot of years of hydrocarbons. So yeah, I understand.
Anybody else? All right. Any members of the public wishing to speak on this comment, on this item?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Very good. And I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move to approve Norco.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call roll call vote.
District 1,
Yes.
District 5,
Yes.
Corona,
Aye.
Eastville,
Aye.
Parupa Valley,
Yes.
Menifee,
Aye.
Norco,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Wildemar.
Yes.
The item passes.
Very good. Thank you, Bryce, and thank you, everybody. Item 8 is amendment to the construction management agreement for the La Sierra Station expansion project. This will be presented by Bryce Johnson.
Thank you. I'm back on. For my second presentation today, this is so that we can make final payment and close out the La Sierra Station expansion project. This has been a project that's been ongoing for a while, but we're now at the end. The project added substantial new parking capacity and a location for connection to local transit service. It was completed last year in 2019, and the final construction cost was $4.7 million. Next slide. The effort to close out the project was a bit difficult. There were numerous design changes and clarifications during construction and a permit issue with the city that extended the final contract acceptance with the contractor. The work was completed in the field, but the difficulty was arriving at an agreed compensation with the contractor. RCTC staff and the construction management firm of S2 Engineering worked at length to evaluate some numerous claims, but eventually we did get all parties to agree to final compensation. It just took some time. The effort to get to this point did require additional construction management services to investigate certain aspects of the claims, as well as closing out this last permit with the city of Riverside. Next slide. Thus, we are requesting an additional $102,069 for construction management services. This total proposed compensation of $940,469 will result in about a 20% support to capital expenditure ratio. This 20% ratio is very much in line for small projects, especially those that have had numerous complications. When we are able to make this final payment, this will close all aspects of the construction phase of this project. And that is my presentation, and be willing to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bryce. Any commissioners have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a quick question. Bryce, again, was this basically just we had some claims and stuff, but it was kind of the cost of doing the white glove test at the end and get everybody on the same page?
Yeah, when I hired on to RCTC, we were about midway or more than midway through the project. And when I came on, there were a lot of, the project went through 2 design firms, and it was switched to WSP, who closed it out for us. We did have quite a few electrical change orders. Sometimes the scoping of the changes and what needed, there was a lot of back and forth. Closed caption TV with the technology trying to get it right, what the transit wanted, what the station wanted, the city wanted. There was one issue where it appeared previous work that was done in that area that we worked adjacent to somehow was damaged, possibly not by us, but those are the disputes we have to work out in the field. So the contractor claimed over $100,000, but we resolved at less than 50% of that. And there was a lot of gray area in that, but we all did come to a good agreed price to close it.
So the main difference was 2 cooks instead of 1 on those designs, and we got it done though. So
we got it done.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else?
Ann Mayer.
I'm sorry, who's that?
Ann Mayer has her hand up.
Yes, Director Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioners, I also want to point out, both for this one and the one previous to it, it is not uncommon for some of our smaller projects like these to actually have higher percentages required for support. It's just the amount of effort you have to put into them is actually more equal to a larger size project. And so usually the percentages are higher in comparison to the overall project cost. So, Bryce mentioned here that the construction management support was around 20%. It's more typical to have it around 15%. Larger projects might be a little bit less. Same thing with contingencies. So these small projects actually seem like they have as many or more details as some of the larger ones on a much smaller scale. But but still, it's good to have the La Sierra project behind us.
Thank you. Anyone else? All righty. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you.
Cost of doing business. Sometimes we come across these hurdles, and a good thing, like Ann just said, is we're closing out this project. So, and 102 could be a lot higher. All right. With
I'll
that,
move the item.
okay, we have a motion. Second.
Second, Eastville.
All right, you have a first and a second. Call roll call vote, please.
District 1,
Yes.
District 5,
Yes.
Corona,
Aye.
Eastville,
Aye.
Harupa Valley,
Yes.
Menifee,
Aye.
Paris,
Yes.
Wildemar.
Yes.
The item passes.
Thank you. Okay, item 9 is commissioners and staff report. Any commissioners have any reports? All right, staff. Man, you guys are really making my job easy. All right, with that, we're gonna go to item 10, which is our adjournment. Our next meeting will be held on October 26th at 1:30. I'm sure it's anticipated it'll be another Zoom meeting. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, and have a nice day and be safe.